my predecessor leaves the university. And so the thought process was, well, we're going to hire someone. Jordan's going to be really involved in the process. What do you want to do? Kind of carve out a role for yourself. Those are the conversations I was having with our executives. Came to it, and it was, guys, can I just do this? And they thought about it, and I was literally given 36 hours to put a plan together and demonstrate that I knew what I was doing. And they just said, all right, it's your shot. And it was supposed to be a 1-year trial, and they never really told me it was over.
All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inside the Industry podcast. As always, my name is Caleb Johnson and I am your host. Here we dive into various parts of the sports industries with multiple professionals from all across the industry. Today I have special guest Jordan Sarnoff with me. He is the Assistant Athletic Director at the University of Nebraska Omaha with a focus in communications. He was named to the top 30 under 30 and given a Rising Star Award by the College Sports Communicators. Jordan, welcome.
Thanks, Caleb. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man. So basically, to start off, why don't you just give the people a brief overview of what your job is and what some of your duties are?
Sure. So at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, I serve as the Assistant Athletic Director of Communications. In that role, I oversee our operation of 4 staff members plus myself. I have 2 full-time staff and 2 part-time employees who aid in the communications efforts for 17 varsity teams at UNO. We're branded as Omaha. And we also have Baxter Arena, which is a $90 million, just over 8,000 seat owned and operated arena by the institution. So we work in concert to promote our personnel, our student athletes, our athletic and academic success, and use athletics, as that window into the university and the academic side of the house.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So let's kind of dive into your career arc a little bit. So you were born and raised in Fort Lee, New Jersey. What was growing up like for you? Were you always into sports? Was it something you've always wanted to be into? Did you play sports growing up?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I played sports growing up, but I was definitely around sports. My Little League baseball career was essentially 2 innings in the field and 1 at bat, which at the time when I was growing up were the minimum play rules, and then I would go do the scoreboard and announce the rest of the game. That was kind of the start of me getting involved in sports. And fortunately, growing up in Fort Lee, it's the home of the George Washington Bridge. It's, in the largest media market in the world, being just outside of New York City. And so being around all the professional teams, and you have the major college brands like Rutgers, St. John's, Seton Hall, Syracuse, and UConn have such a huge presence in the tri-state area, and obviously, in northern New Jersey, Bergen County, where I'm from. So being around all of that and getting to know some of the folks who made it happen, that definitely piqued my interest. And fortunately, I was able to volunteer with Little League, so learned operations when I was in middle school, helping run some of those summer tournaments, keeping the book and checking, the birth certificates and the age verification forms, and, learned how to deal with some disgruntled coaches and parents. And, getting that education positioned me for high school, got really involved with athletics at Fort Lee High School and the Fort Lee Public School District. That led me to FDU and here to Omaha.
There you go. So is it kind of safe to say that you've always wanted to be in the sports industry, and that's kind of a thing that you've been chasing since you were a young kid, but may or may not be obviously the playing aspect of it?
Yeah, I always wanted to work in sports. I knew very early on playing was not on the cards. I'm not the tallest, right? Don't have the best hand-eye coordination to play baseball. I mean, I was out shagging for our softball team a couple weeks ago, and I don't think I made contact with a single fly ball at the outfield, I think everybody is able to find a place in sports. For some people, that comes, in competition, actually performing and playing, and, the sheer athleticism is just uncanny. But for me, it was how could I get involved? Where can I make an impact? And ultimately, I found that on the executive administrative side.
For sure. That's awesome. All right, so let's go back to when you were like 8 or 9 years old. I heard a story you were telling about where you got hit in the eye at Mets batting practice,
Yeah.
and the letter you wrote to Fred Wilpon and your relationship with Jay Horwitz. Let's just kind of dive into that whole Mets childhood thing you got going on.
Wow. You must have gone deep in the archives for that one. I haven't told that story in a while. So this was probably 2010. I was 8 years old. Mets batting practice. It's Carlos Beltran and Angel Pagan, and they're tossing up the first baseline. This is pre-extended netting, and coincidentally, a security guard came over a few minutes before it happened and says to my dad, even though they're professionals, they miss once in a while. Kind of an odd thing to say, right? You think about how many baseball games people go to and where they stand for BP. And back in the days, they used to let, no matter where your seat was, if you got there right when the gates open, it used to be, almost 3 hours before the game. Now they've since shortened it to 90 minutes or 2 hours, depending on the venue. You used to go all the way down. It was basically home plate was off limits, but you can go down the lines, outfield, wherever. So we're there. Angel Pagan and Carlos Beltran are tossing, and they miss the catch. So the ball slides off my dad's fingers, gets me in the eye. Not the reason I wear glasses. That happened years later. But they come over, they take pictures, they start signing. I was the most popular kid in the section that day because I had a bag of Carlos Beltran and Angel Pagan signed baseballs and all these pictures, and it was fantastic. And we go to the stadium doctor. They literally escort us in a tunnel. They bring us to her, and she's doing all these tests. Can you see? My dad's on the phone with my mother. Are we going to take him home? Does he need to go to the hospital? It's like, no, we're going to stay and watch the game. So go through all of that. We stay, game ends, and I write a letter to Fred Wilpon saying, this happened. This team was unbelievable. Staff was unbelievable. I think I made it on PowerPoint. I was 8 years old. I didn't know the difference between how to address a letter or whatever, but I did know how to address an envelope. So I asked my dad for a stamp, and he says, there is no chance this dude is going to read this letter, but knock yourself out. I write the letter to Fred Wilpon, put it in the mail, and it is around Columbus Day weekend. I'll never forget this. That same year, so we're sticking in 2010, and Carrie Kwok from Mets marketing staff at the time left a voicemail on the house phone. And I'll never forget my mom saying, the voicemail said, if your son wrote a letter to the New York Mets, please call us back. And so my parents immediately go, well, what did he say? So they call back, and it's, the letter was sent to Fred's private office in Great Neck, New York, sent it back to the stadium, but without the return address. So we started calling Sarnoffs in the phone book. That's how it, because this is still, early 21st century, internet, research, social media, not there yet. So they called Sarnoffs in the phone book, got to us in Fort Lee, and the rest is history. The following year, they invited my family out for a game, got to go on the field for batting practice, got to meet Jay for the first time, like you alluded to earlier, and Ethan Wilson, who's Senior Director of Media Relations for the Mets now, and, got to see players and take pictures, sit at the press conference dais, go up to the, in-game presentation control room, get to wander the press box, get to do all those things that you just dream of. And since then, I've been so fortunate to be able to stay in touch with many of those Mets employees, some who have moved on, and get to meet some new folks.
How influential was that to, kind of get that inside scoop of what the front office and media relations inside pro sports was at such a young age? Did that kind of spark your flame to really go forward and charge hard and pursue this dream?
I don't know if it impacted me then, but it impacts me a lot now because I realized that wasn't normal. To me, it was the lesson my parents had always instilled in my sister and I, which is if you don't ask, you don't get. And when I made that outreach to the Mets, there was no ask, or I wasn't savvy enough to realize there was an ask, right? I'm 8 years old at the time. But having that positive interaction with somebody who is a fan, not really knowing anyone on the business side or even baseball operations. I think that positive engagement led me to believe, wait, people actually get paid to be around this. Like, this person is taking us on the field before a Major League Baseball game. That's their job. I think that definitely stuck with me, through the rest of elementary school and through middle school. And it wasn't really until I was probably 12 or 13 that I really said, okay, I want this, I'm going to go get it. But it was definitely a formidable part of just my upbringing, having those experiences because of the circumstances in which they occurred.
Absolutely. Even at 12 or 13 to be like, yeah, I'm going to go get this. That's still like so far ahead of most kids. Let's go ahead and kind of move on a little bit. Let's talk about the Iron Eagle and Bruce Beck broadcasting summer camp. How did that kind of come to be? I know that's an opportunity I wish I knew about and could have taken advantage of as a kid. Talk about your experiences there and how you've kind of networked and all of those good things.
Yeah, so have to give credit where credit is due. I did not want to go to the camp. My mother basically had to beg me to go. I had no intention of ever being in front of the camera, had no intention of being a broadcaster. And my mom said, I think you'll enjoy this. I think this will be a really good opportunity for you. So she said, listen, it's 5 days. We drop you off. We pick you up. It's not an overnight thing. It was 25, 30 minutes from the house out in Montclair. Just do it. So went through it, and, you're a little skeptical, right? It's Bruce Beck, a name everybody knows, lead sports anchor for WNBC, which is the NBC affiliate in New York City, and Iron Eagle, who, if you're from the Tri-City, you know him as the play-by-play voice of the Nets, and his work at WFAN with Mike and the Mad Dog, and Jets preseason on CBS. And then you get into the national work he does, TNT Sports with the NBA, and March Madness, and the NFL on CBS, and Westwood One. Like, you get into all that. You think, okay, they make an appearance, they show face, they lend their name to it, you get a picture, move on. No, they were your camp counselors. Like, that is the wildest thing to say, but Bruce and I are there, and then you go up the hill with Mike Quick, right? That's how it went at the time. That was the experience that I think set me up on the path, because the premise was really simple. It's Bruce and I are here. They're going to impart knowledge. They're going to tell some great stories. You're going to get to eat lunch with them every day and just sit on these picnic tables at a minor league baseball stadium, and they're going to bring in food, and you'll literally just get to shoot the breeze with them about anything. I mean, there was nothing off limits, and we're going to bring in all of these big names that and they're going to talk to you as well, and you can mingle with them. It's not like you bring them in, they leave. No, there was time where I talked to Kenny Albert, talked to Willie Colon, talked to Tina Servacio, got to talk to Evan Roberts, talked to, Mike Breen, I remember. There was Gary Apple, Steve Gelbs. You think about it, John Fana, all these names, right? And then you get into, okay, well, this is obviously an opportunity to meet people and to network. So how can you go ahead and use this opportunity to stay in touch? So Ian would give his email out at the end of each camp. So you get to the Thursday was the last in-person. Friday you met at the minor league baseball game to call play-by-play into, your voice memos. And a couple kids would get picked to go into the booth and actually, hop on air. And Ian would give his email out. And I stayed in touch with him from the time I was 12 to I was just texting with him this morning, Having that relationship and that interaction, you learn so much just about life, not even about sports. And then you take it a step further into all of the people that came through that camp. So Tina Servacio, stayed in touch with her when I was at FDU. And I had, stories I wanted to tell, whether it was our women's bowling team or men's volleyball or men's basketball success or promotion we were doing. I was able to say, hey, Tina, I have something for you. Or Sam Ryan and Ryan Field at ABC, Otis Livingston and Chris Gaglione at CBS. Or, Bruce at NBC, and then you meet the Pixel 11 guys. You learn the sports world in New York is really small. So having those interactions and having that, relationship to establish a rapport with those people, that put me years ahead when I was at FDU, because I was 19 when I got the full-time job, and I was able to go back to people who I already knew 6-7 years to be able to say, hey, can you help me with this?
Gotcha. I mean, man, that's amazing. And I mean, just to hear the stories of it, it just sounds like exhilarating, like just being around those people at such a young age, like people that, I idolized, maybe you yourself idolized as a kid. It's just, what a cool experience.
It was the coolest. I did 2 summers with Bruce and Ian, 1 summer with Mike Quick in Montclair, and then I did another summer with Mike in New Row at another camp that they had started. So that was basically my entire middle school to sophomore year of high school.
Gotcha. Yeah, I saw, whenever I was doing my research, I saw some of the clips like on YouTube of you, like talking in the mic and interviewing and stuff. That was funny to see.
I've watched them from time to time, not gonna lie, but I cringe sometimes because it's like you learn so much from that, and then doing what I do now, you watch the actual professionals do it in their telecasts and their radio calls and all of that, and it's, what was I doing holding the mic like this? It should be the inside hand on an interview. It's just all those little things drive me nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. That happens to the best of us as we grow and we learn. Let's move on to kind of your high school career, because that's something that is very interesting to me. You ended up serving as the SID and the PA announcer for Fort Lee Public Schools. You were also the social media coordinator for the Super Football Conference, and you did some work with the Little League with like the area's Little League teams. I couldn't find exactly what you were doing for them, but let's just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have a high school athletic director, Mike Raftery, who let me get as involved as I wanted. And I mean, we kind of called myself sports information director. It was more like an assistant athletic director, deputy athletic director role, where I was doing, the scheduling for the teams. I was calling other schools about booking games. I was handling some officiating matters, helping, make purchases and design uniforms, windscreens, facility upgrades. I mean, you name it. The things that you read about in college athletics now, or even pro sports, about new this, new that, I got to do that in high school, which was awesome and unheard of. So while I was doing that, I was also the PA announcer for the games. Knew I wasn't going to make a career out of that, but I had a lot of fun doing it. A lot of great rivalry basketball games and football and wrestling and little volleyball and baseball, softball. Doing all of that, building out a live streaming infrastructure. It made my 4 years of high school go by in an instant. And it was just so much fun being a part of that magic. And then just by virtue of, I guess, establishing myself at Fort Lee as a bridgeman, and then, getting to grow at the Super Football Conference, I was also involved with an NJSIAA, which is the State High School Governing Association for, athletics, very similar to, the NSAA here in Nebraska or other, bodies that are members of the NFHS. Being able to have a voice at that table through their student advisory group, being involved continually with Little League in the similar role to what I talked about earlier, and getting to build what I thought was probably the first in the country for a high school athletic conference to have a social media presence. And how are we going to get scores out efficiently? How are we going to share updates, all conference honors? All of that hadn't been done before in North Jersey, and I was kind of looked to on, okay, how can you build this? And we did.
That's amazing, man. I have a question for you. What was your relationship like with the various athletes in the area? Like they obviously knew who you were. You were around the games, calling their games over, the public address announcer and all of that good stuff. What were those relationships like?
Oh, in high school, I mean, they weren't strangers. My parents are both very involved in town. My sister was a Girl Scout and played various sports, and she continued that through high school. So my family and I were known in town, right? And so when I got to do it, it was like, oh, Jordan's just doing his thing. It wasn't anything special. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. It was people I had known essentially my entire life, where, the older kids from the area where we grew up in town, who you would see at the pool in the complex where my parents live, you would at the tennis courts, or, the playground, the outdoor basketball hoop. All of those people you're now supporting, and the dynamic always changes a little bit, but when you have that mutual trust, and it's a similar thing to what I had to deal with at FDU, when you have that mutual understanding of, this is why I'm doing this, here's how it helps you, and vice versa, you get a real but in high school, having those understandings with the athletes, right? It was uncomfortable because maybe I was looked at as the hard ass a little bit, or an extension of administration or authority, those things high school kids usually don't particularly care for. I think people understood once they saw the work we were doing. I think that quelled a lot of concern.
Absolutely. I got one more question for you, and then we'll move into the FDU part of things. What was it like to kind of pioneer the social media aspect for your school's or your area's conference? Like, what went into that? What were the details that went into making that happen?
I'll never forget having to go with my high school AD. It was like a Wednesday morning to a steakhouse in Nutley, New Jersey, which was where the Super Football Conference was meeting, and it was all athletic directors from area schools, over 100 schools in northern New Jersey across multiple counties, and a couple of superintendents and a bunch of retired ADs, and basically giving a PowerPoint presentation on, this is what we need to do, this is what we should do, and this is how we're going to do it. And when I was able to competently, answer the questions that they posed, it was, okay, what do you need to get started? And we kind of went from there. And since then, they've hired an agency of record. They're continuing to grow social media presence through opportunities that you usually see once you get to Division III or Division II. And so having been a part of establishing that is definitely something that I'm, proud of, and it's great to see it continue to grow at the level that they've achieved.
Absolutely. Cool. So let's get into FDU a little bit. So your senior year in high school, from what I understand, you were pretty much set on going to FDU at the time. And correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just the story that I came to understand, but you basically just like reached out or walked in the office or something and was kind of like, hey, can I get involved? And you started doing some replay work for them. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. So I decided I was going to go to FDU, and it was really clear how hard it was to get involved in Division I athletic departments at the level I wanted to get involved in. What you see is when a lot of people come in as undergraduates, the opportunities you have to get involved are usually game day help, and you do see a lot through all of this. I'm not, belittling any of it, but it's game day work and helping in the equipment room and stocking, the training room, and a couple things with strength and conditioning, and maybe you're running a study hall for academics. For me, it was, well, okay, if communications is my path right now, what do I need to do to be able to own sport contacts as my own? And you see that when you get to larger schools that you have, student contacts with supervision, but it's usually, Olympic sports or non-ticketed sports. For me, it was, okay, what's my path to take over men's basketball? That was my, eager 18-year-old take over the world. That was where my head went. So it was really clear that there was a lot of opportunity at FDU, because at the time the comm staff was 2 full-timers and 2 graduate assistants. And they had just hired, a new athletic director, a new associate AD of external. It's an exciting time. They're coming off a win in the NCAA tournament. They beat Prairie View A&M in 2019. I started college in the fall of 2020. So I reach out and said, hey, I'm probably going to come next year. What's the opportunity look like? And they said, well, why don't we get you in game days? Let us know when you're free. You can do replay review for men's and women's basketball. That sounded really cool to me. So did that. Then COVID comes. I PA'd one softball game against St. John's, and then the world shut down. They had some furloughs. So Jason Young, who was the associate AD of external at the time, now he's senior associate AD CLO, reaches out to me and says, hey, we're going to start working on this content. We want you involved. So let's get started. So I am the furthest thing from a graphic designer. I know how to execute a template somebody sends me on Photoshop. I am not the guy you want making graphics. When I look at some of the stuff I made that summer, I just scratch my head. But we got through it. We kept our fan base engaged. We kept our constituents informed. We helped our student athletes stay connected. And ultimately, we got through COVID. Made it through the end of basketball season. Women's bowling makes the NCAA tournament, and then my predecessor leaves the university. And so the thought process was, well, we're going to hire someone. Jordan's going to be really involved in the process. What do you want to do? Kind of carve out a role for yourself. Those are the conversations I was having with our executives. Came to it, and it was, guys, can I just do this? And they thought about it, and I was literally given 36 hours to put a plan together and demonstrate that I knew what I was doing. And they just went and said, all right, it's your shot. And it was supposed to be a 1-year trial, and they never really told me it was over. And that led to, adding more graduate assistants. And I was 19, managing a team of 6 with a full-timer. It was a lot. And I'm also taking classes while this is going on. People don't talk enough about, particularly with conference realignment and the travel and some of the time constraints, the time management excellence student athletes have to have is off the charts. And I appreciate that even more firsthand because I lived something very similar doing what I was doing. Now, granted, I had somewhat of an advantage because a lot of my classes were online because of COVID and other circumstances. But at the same time, when a paper's due at midnight, it's due at midnight. And having to navigate that in addition to fielding all the media requests, the excitement of a March Madness run, multiple conference championships and NCAA appearances, an Olympian track and field athlete, Salif Mane, who was just in the Paris Games. Navigating all of that in a market as big as New York, at a school as small as FDU, and trying to make the most of the resources you're given, it was an unbelievable learning experience for me, and it definitely changed the trajectory of my career for the better. And I look back on those years so fondly. I still talk to a lot of folks in athletics there, a lot of former student athletes who are my, friends and classmates and people who lived in the dorms with me. And so continuing those relationships is just, it's what this is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome, man. To kind of backtrack a little bit, you mentioned you had 36 hours to develop a plan. I'm sure there's some sort of story with that. Kind of dive into what exactly, the idea or, the general idea of it, because I know you probably have a million details in your head that you can associate with that.
So essentially it was unheard of for an undergraduate, right? I was a sophomore. Summer into sophomore year was when they made the decision. And it was essentially, okay, you want this, be careful what you wish for type of thing. How are you going to deal with all of these different things? And I had to say, well, I know I'm not a graphic designer, so part of the plan was I had to convince one of our graduate assistants who had just graduated, Preston Jones, who is one of the most talented, creative individuals I've been around, to get him to come back. And we shared the office, and we divided and conquered. And having him on our team allowed me to focus on media relations, What does our event management operation look like? What's our financial structure within our unit? How am I maximizing the budget? How am I utilizing grants we get from the conference and other sources? And navigating all of that all had to be put into this document, so they have the confidence that not only could I basically write my own job description, but what are the quantifiable measures that we can make sure everything's staying on track. So it was basically tell them the job that I was going to do and how can they make sure I'm getting the job done.
Gotcha. Man, that's crazy to be doing all that.
I still don't believe it's real.
I mean, I imagine so.
And they think it's a completely made up story because it's literally one of those too good to be true type of deals.
Yeah, I mean, especially at 19 years old to be even able to, grasp the majority of those concepts is just mind blowing. Let's go into 2023 a little bit, because I mean, from what I've read, 2023 seems to be like the best year of your life, man. Like,
yeah, no doubt.
So for those who don't know, I don't know who wouldn't know, obviously FDU 16 seed goes on to beat number 1 seed Purdue. You kind of get some national recognition through like Jamie Erdahl. She did like a little minute piece. I don't remember where in the game it was, but just kind of briefly telling your story. And then you kind of started popping up everywhere with interviews and all of that stuff. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Just the craziness of it all.
As I've told some other folks, it's a hell of a way to kick off your 21st birthday. But FDU, 4-22, my first year as the men's basketball contact, my sophomore year. Change of coach, hire Tobin Anderson on, early May 2022. We go on this run. We fall in the conference championship game, but because Merrimack was a reclassifying Division II institution at the time, we got the automatic qualifier, because in the NEC, the caveat was the runner-up gets to go. So we actually celebrated after we won the semifinal against St. Francis U, because we knew no matter what, we were going to the NCAA championship.
Wow.
So our line was actually, we're going to Dayton, because we already knew we were going to be a first 4 team. So that was kind of how we celebrated. But go on this media run, and for us, it was managing publicity going into that, because the Northeast Conference Championship is really early in bracket or championship week, depending what network it is, what they call it. And so we were on an ESPN platform. We were early. We were a Tuesday championship. Selection show was Sunday. So we had almost a week of a runway to tell our story. And we did appearances on CBS Sports Network, Inside College Basketball. I believe it was actually during a Patriot League game. We were on CBS Sports Radio. We were on Mad Dog, Sirius XM, NBA Radio on Sirius XM. All the stations in New York. We did stuff, with ESPN, Field of 68, Fox Sports, you name it. And then you actually get into the tournament, and it's a whole nother cycle. Because for us, we start in Dayton. So you get shipped out immediately to your site. So we left Monday to play Wednesday, did our open practice on Tuesday, did our closed practice, did all the media obligations, pregame press conference, open locker room, all of that stuff. And win in Dayton, beat Texas Southern. We bus 45 minutes to Columbus, play Purdue Friday night, beat them in the greatest upset in college basketball history. Do a whole nother media run, do Good Morning America the next morning, like literally everything. Sunday comes, we play Florida Atlantic. Just unbelievable game. I mean, we were a 6-0 run from playing at Madison Square Garden in the Sweet 16. And that still hasn't set in. And during the first half of that game, Jamie Erdahl, who was the sideline reporter for the broadcast crew, the game was on True TV, does this sideline hit on me. And I kind of had an idea it was coming. They started asking for pictures of me, and they wanted to know details of stories. And so I knew something was coming, but usually I'm having those conversations about other people and other stories. So for it to be about me was, a really, really different experience. But ultimately, they do this sideline hit. Jamie talks about it. Andrew Catalan and Steve Lapis in the booth tag on to it a little bit. Talk about Steve Somers, the schmoozer in the midnight on WFAN. Everybody else go laughing at it, and my phone starts blowing up. I mean, I look through my phone and randomly an unread message will pop up, and I hate having notifications on my phone. I respond to everything instantly. And that outpouring of support was just so overwhelming. And then, our season ends, we go to the Today Show, we lose our coach later that day to Iona, and, we act quickly, we promote Jack, we get everything ready. I go on this whole other press tour, and then our women's basketball coach leaves. We hire Stephanie Gately, and then in between going to the bowling championship and the men's Final Four, I had the press conference, new women's basketball coach. We go to the NEC bowling championship, season ends there. Then I fly to Houston because the NCAA invited me to join the National Media Coordination Committee for the men's Final Four that year. And then, I end up on the Barstool event they had and all this other stuff. And it was really just a whirlwind of an experience. And it's not lost on me that I look at stuff and I get emotional. That's something that people work 50 years in this business and they never dream of it. And I got to live it and everything that comes after it. The fundraising exercises you go through. What are the facility enhancements you make to sustain momentum? What does scheduling look like? How does this impact other programs and the institution as a whole? What are the other opportunities that came out of it, like negotiating a deal with the Yes Network and being able to rebrand the institution with a new athletic logo with VPCO? All of those things people don't think about until you're in it. And even when you're in it, being organized was the biggest thing for Jason and I, that we had a plan. We knew what we wanted to do and how to get there. And it was literally just waiting for the dominoes to fall. And then we had our punch list and we were ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, man, like you said, what a whirlwind. Like it's so hard for me to even form a follow-up question right now because there's so many layers to it. But it's crazy to me, besides all of the stuff that you were just talking about, that you were doing that while in school. That is just... I had to get some help. I haven't even told this story yet. I mean, I'm graduated and I have a diploma, so I'm not worried about it now. I had to get some help because I basically, I'm going on this press, I'm riding the high of my life. And it's this class, I don't have to worry about that. So I missed maybe 3 or 4 weeks of classes going into the tail end of the spring semester. So I had to have our people make some phone calls to basically okay, he'll get an extension on these projects and this and that. So it was, I got myself in a fair amount of trouble that month, but it was definitely well worth it. Yeah, absolutely. What was it like just negotiating and meeting with and setting up interviews with all of these national media conglomerates? What goes into all that?
It came really naturally. I mean, there's things I would do differently now, and I have done differently since that, but it's no different than anything else. The one thing that I did a little differently than a lot of people in this position at low and mid-major institutions is I was adamant that as much as we appreciated the platform, if we were going to do it, please send an actual crew. Zoom is great. It makes us more accessible, and we're able to do interviews with people we wouldn't even be able to touch because, of the expense element and travel logistics and all of that. But if we're in a city and we're in a really nice ballroom, I mean, we stayed at a great hotel in Columbus. I believe it was the Westin. It was an old theater. So our ballroom was literally an auditorium. It was unbelievable. It was featured in episodes of March Madness Confidential. Tremendous. Being able to show that off as opposed to a Zoom, we did stuff with NBC Nightly News and having a crew on site. We were able to do, Good Morning America via Zoom, but we did the Today Show in person in New York. All of those navigations, it's not so much a negotiation, it's more prioritize your time, and then ultimately, what are your personnel able to do? What are their restraints? When you're in the thick of the tournament, it's a little bit more of an internal negotiation where you have to have your coach on the same page. You have to keep your athletes engaged because at that point, once you win a game, you're not just happy to be there anymore. Now it's, well, how far can we go? So being able to balance all of that with the external side of it, knowing what that does for the institution as a whole, we were able to navigate that rather smoothly compared to some other experiences I've heard.
For sure. Let's talk about Coach Tobin a little bit. I think I remember reading that he was like a later hire. Y'all hired him in like May 6th and came off of like a not so great year the previous year. Yeah. So did you think like you even had like a chance for all of this stuff to happen? What was your initial thoughts, and then what was your thoughts like right before you played Purdue in Ohio?
So we hired Tobin really late. So the coaching change was made April 25th of 2022. We announced Tobin a little over a week later, like you said. And I got to meet with him as part of the interview process, and Jason Young really spearheaded the whole thing. But it was clear, like, this guy's awesome. I love his energy. The program's definitely going to change in a different direction. And I really like the staff he brought in. I really like some of the guys that joined our roster. And he kept some great pieces as well. Never thought it was going to culminate in year one in a, automatic qualifier to the NCAA championship. Once we beat Texas Southern, he did say in the locker room, the more I watch Purdue, the more I think we can beat them. And that was actually quoting Cam Morrell, who was an assistant coach at the time for the team. And, part of me was like, yeah, you don't know. But I remember right before the game, my dad was getting on a flight from Newark to Columbus, and he was just coming to be a part of it. My mom works at FDU, and she was actually a bus chaperone for the first four, but they sent those kids back to New Jersey after the first four. So it was just parents, families, a couple student athletes made the drive out, a couple were able to fly. But for that Purdue game, I talked to my dad morning of, and I said, I think we're at least going to keep it interesting. And then finally I said to him, Knights by 3, we won by 5.
Hey, that's
oh my God, what can I say?
What a story, man. Let's talk about the Final Four. So you got the invitation. I believe I think I saw it was through like David Warlock and those people over there. So just talk about that experience and how that was. I mean, at 21 years old, to be a part of that committee is just absolutely insane.
It was a great learning experience, great networking opportunity to see an international operation of that scale. And the NCAA men's basketball staff is the absolute best in the world at what they do. And over the last few years, I've been really fortunate to get to know, Joanne Scott, Dan Gavitt, and the whole team there. And seeing what they do, how they do it, why they do it, it creates for an unbelievable experience. And I've now been fortunate to go to the tournament twice with 2 different institutions, 2 very different experiences. Seeing all of that gives me a great appreciation for it. But just being there, I got the email basically saying, hey, if you want to join us, there's a spot for you. We're covering the cost. I think I read that 20 minutes after our year ended. And I just remember showing it to Brad Hurlbut, the AD at FDU, and he's like, yeah, you got to go. So having that support from him to dip, the president was on board, everybody was on board. So I did it, had a great experience, was just at the men's Final Four in San Antonio to see some folks and just take in the celebration of college men's basketball. It's a real special event, and I'm fortunate, just to be a small part of it.
So you were at the Final Four this year too? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I went down there. I love the event, and the way schedules fell last year, I didn't go to Phoenix. So I said, you know what, I think I'm going to go to San Antonio. I hear it's a great men's Final Four city. Surprisingly easy to get to from Omaha. So I waited to book my travel till after, our time in the tournament ended and got on the flight, went right down to San Antonio. By way of Denver.
That's awesome, man. So you graduate from FDU in 2024, and shortly after you take the job at Omaha, I believe I think I saw it was in August or something like that. Talk about kind of your decision to leave FDU. I don't know if they had an opportunity still present for you.
Yeah.
And then also just the adjustment of, being a New Jersey, New York area kid moving all the way to Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, all I knew about Omaha was the Berkshire Hathaway, the NCAA Men's College World Series, and Creighton. Couldn't tell you anything else about Omaha, right? So I graduated actually in December of 23. I walked in the May 24 graduation, but I stayed on with FDU through summer months, helping with a couple PR campaigns, obviously publicity for the Olympian Salif Mane I mentioned earlier. And an opportunity came up at Omaha. I was looking through either college sports jobs or D1 ticker, and I said, oh, this is interesting. And, I had an opportunity at FDU, but I was still keeping my eye on a couple other things and keeping them apprised through the process. And get an email a couple weeks after I applied. I didn't even remember applying for the job. And, hey, if you want to interview for it, we'd love to talk to you. Take the interview. Next thing I know, they're flying me out here for a second interview. Get offered the job, and I said, you know what? Yeah, I'll do this. I'll see what it's like. I went to college 10 minutes from home, and I love to see another part of the country, see new experiences, grow, and eventually I'm gonna make my way back east. That's the goal. But having now almost 10 months under my belt in Omaha, it's been a great experience. A bunch of things have happened that I didn't think would happen, and I kind of seem to step in it with some wild campaigns, whether it's men's basketball players stuck in an elevator at FDU or an assistant coach beating up trash cans. I kind of always find a way to have some fun in this crazy college sports world.
You gotta dive into that a little bit more. The assistant coach beating up trash cans. What's that all about?
Yeah, that was something Omaha men's basketball did this year. It became an international social media sensation. And Kyan Brown, associate head coach, after every win, starting from a late December non-conference game, would beat a trash can up in the locker room after these wins. And it started out as just a locker room thing that he was talking to the team before the game, didn't think they had a lot of energy. It was before a non-conference game against Cal Poly, and he kicked a trash can as part of his getting pumped up, just kicked a trash can, and according to players who were in there, he said something to the effect of, well, if the trash can's in here again after we win, I'm going to beat it up again. Something along those lines. So sure enough, they snapped the losing skid, they beat Cal Poly, and first words out of their mouths are, hey, coach, it's still in here. So he kicks it or throws whatever he does afterwards, and then they win another game and another game. And, Chris Crutchfield still in the midst of, turning this program around at the time. They had, never won a trophy in the Division I era, haven't been to the NCAA tournament as a Division I institution. So they're starting to win, get this juice. And next thing I know, ESPN's calling. We're doing stuff with The Athletic. We're doing interviews, Field of 68. We're doing stuff on the radio. We're doing stories with the local newspaper and the local TV stations in Omaha and some digital media organizations. And then next thing I know is they start incorporating wrestling moves into this celebration. And Zach Levine, who was one of my assistant directors at the time, started filming it on his own volition and posting them on Twitter. So then it starts to gain a following of after a win, you look at the comments or the replies on these posts, and it's, oh, bad night to be a trash can in Grand Forks. Can't wait to see what Omaha does tonight. That was the level to which this rose. So before we get into the wrestling, I had this idea coming off of a movie theater chain, Cinemark, did Bring Your Own Container Day for National Popcorn Day, where you could bring any size container and they fill it up with popcorn. I wanted to do that with trash cans. It took some convincing, but got the AD on board, got, our concessions partner on board, got the arena GM on board. They had to talk to public safety because now they were considered projectiles. And then there was a conversation, okay, do we need to involve the health department? And finally, we announced February 1st, bring your own can night. And that, was a Barstool Sports front page story. CBS Sports covered it. It was talked about on TV stations everywhere from Omaha to Los Angeles to Augusta, Georgia. I found press clips. It just captivated so many people. Sickos Committee actually had somebody on site. We made it on Scott Van Pelt. It was unbelievable. And it's just a byproduct of this team just kept winning. That was the crazy thing. So then you fast forward to later in the month, we're about to lock up at least a share of the regular season title. I was able to get in touch with, through a couple buddies of mine, Lindo Laludis, the VP of marketing at AEW, and it was, hey, we're doing this celebration. Here's some videos. How can we get you guys involved? Well, it turns out they were getting set to announce a show in Omaha. So all the marketing minds kind of came together, and it was, okay, we're going to send the Outrunners, a men's tag team, to come talk to the team before the game at shoot-around, and we filmed it. We put it on Twitter, went viral. We're going to have them take pictures with fans on the concourse before the game. They're going to sit courtside next to the Chancellor in Omaha gear. They're going to cheer for the Mavericks. And then, when Omaha wins this game against South Dakota, they're going to go in the locker room and they're going to do the post-game celebration. And I just remember walking out of that locker room. The athletic director, Adrian Dowell, was standing along the wall by the training room. Matt Maher, executive associate, he was standing next to him. And I just looked at him and said, I have no words for what happened in there. I mean, it was a riot. It was unbelievable. And this partnership with AEW started that they overnighted the AEW World Championship belt to the arena and gave us custom side plates that when we outright won the regular season title, Joanne Lee, the chancellor of UNO, actually popped out of a trash can at midcourt holding a 13-pound AEW World Championship belt, and that visual got a full-page spread in the Omaha World Herald. Wow. And Barstool, and was shown on various CBS Sports programming around the NCAA tournament, was shown on the pregame open. It was unbelievable. Yeah. It was all this wild idea I had of, okay, if they're going to go in a wrestling direction, let's take advantage of it. And I remember watching, various pro wrestling programs from WWE with regards to like SmackDown and Raw when I was in, middle school, elementary school. Always kept an eye on it because it's just so ingrained in American culture. And then you see the Big 12 does a partnership with WWE regarding logos on the field and a belt for the football champion. St. Bonaventure and Adrian Wojnarowski do the WWE belt that they give to the player of the game. So my thing was, okay, if AEW wants to go all in with us, that's awesome. Let's own this vertical and let's be really good partners to them. And they've been unbelievable through the whole thing. We've had debriefs. We've talked about, okay, what does the future look like? It's been a blast working with them.
Yeah, that's an awesome story, man. To kind of wrap it up in terms of like the career arc, and then we'll get into like the advice stuff, like I was telling you before we started the show. What, just in a few words, just describe how it's been to just be in Omaha and away from everything, and just this first year of really getting to fully without the distraction of school and things of that nature, wow. Just go out and chase this wholeheartedly. Like, what's the main differences you've seen?
I'm able to focus a little differently. I was always really focused on my work. My parents probably don't want to hear this, but I was definitely a work first, school second guy. Even though I was telling student athletes it was the opposite. It was the schoolwork first, that whole student first, athlete second, which I believe to be incredibly true. And and I try and live by that a little bit. But for me, it was an experience on, okay, what can I do? How can I make an impact at a place where I don't know anyone? I don't know anybody in the city. And how can I learn a new system? FDU, private, non-sectarian. Then you go to a state institution in the University of Nebraska system. And that's where I learned, okay, we can do this, we can't do this. Here's how we engage with this unit. Here's how the foundation works. And that education really helped me because I came from a place where we just found a way to get it done. And at UNO and with Omaha Athletics, there are resources in place to help you achieve the things you want to do, whether it's IT infrastructure related, whether it's, budgetary or on the fiscal end of things, or even equipment services. We sent John Gruden a care package, and it was, okay, have your pick. What do you want to send him? So we had his shoe size, we had his shirt size, we had all of that. The athletic director, Adrian, picked out the shoes to send to John Gruden. Having that abundance of supplies and that buy-in from the campus community and, your cross-campus organizational partnerships, that was a huge benefit to me in my learning experience. So it's been a great year. We're co-hosts of the NCAA Men's College World Series now. So I'll be one of the local media coordinators alongside Rob Anderson at Creighton for that in a couple of weeks. And just try and enjoy, what'll be my first full year, because I started a little bit into the fall season. So now it's how can I build the team the way I want? How can I, improve on some of the things that maybe we lacked in this past year or that they haven't done before. So now I really get to implement that system, almost like a coach does with building a program. I now get to do that with this unit to hopefully leave it in a better place than I found it.
That's awesome, man. So you obviously you're going to be at Omaha for some time, but what's the long-term goal?
The long term, I'd really like to be a Division I athletic director. I think the job is changing nearly every day with uncertainties in the landscape, the impending House settlement, and just some of the governance changes with the NCAA and some of the autonomous conferences. But ultimately, I think this is a job about people. And we're still trying to support athletes to perform at their best. We're trying to get them graduated and set them up for life beyond sport, and also build that community that comes around campus pride, whether that's affinity groups like your alums or boosters or, staff members, community members, season ticket holders, and just that support that comes around college athletics that's so differently than the pro game or other amateur organizations or even high school sports. Having that development is something that I'd like to continue to contribute to. And so have a ways to go, right? And I have to remind myself sometimes, I'm 23, I'm a little ahead of the ball right now. So it's just being present, doing my job now to the best I can to make that impact, be a positive contributor to the organization, to our student athletes, to our stakeholders, and then see what the future has in store.
Absolutely. You mentioned being present. And that's something I try to implement in my life, and I think most people do. What kind of keeps you present and keeps you grounded? How do you do that for yourself?
I think honestly, it's engaging with our student athletes. If you're having, a bad day, or you've got a bunch of meetings piling up, or all of these tasks are coming due and maybe you're a little behind, I think just walking over to a field and hanging out at practice and talking to student athletes, it reminds you why we do what we do. And I often think about it as this isn't a job. I get to work in sports, talk about sports, talk to people who work in sports. I get to experience games. There's some other perks that come along with this. And being able to just appreciate that. I don't feel like I've worked a day in my life because the hours were long, but it's around something I love. Like we just finished hosting the Summit League Baseball Championship, and it was 2 games a day for back-to-back days, a single game on Friday, and then doubleheader on Saturday. And it was an unbelievable week just watching baseball, and I was the official scorer for 5 out of the 7 games. and just being around that. You love it, you appreciate it. And all of that and the connections and the friendships that come out of it, that's what keeps me grounded. Because I know that if I'm going through something, I could call somebody at Davidson, I can call FDU, I can call Rutgers, I can call Creighton, I can call the Huskers, I can call the conference office, NCAA staff, whatever. And I know people who have also gone through it, and be able to talk to them, get their advice, catch up on life. All of that just makes it so fulfilling, and that holistic element of it is just impactful for me.
For sure. So obviously the people, like you said, our mutual friend Colin Cosell, when I was talking to him about you, called you one of the most connected people in the industry. Share your networking advice and how you approach building and forming and sustaining relationships within this industry.
Yeah, it comes down to just not being shy. What I've found is a lot of people, myself included in sports, are willing to share our story, share our background that may resonate with someone and may be very similar to their path, or it gives them a different avenue. It's don't be afraid to ask questions. I'll find a network executive just standing at a table at an event, and I'll go talk to them. I'll introduce myself. I'll say, hey, I saw you did this. Can you walk me through it? Or what's next? And ultimately staying in touch. There doesn't always have to be an ask. When I look at my network, I consider many of those people friends who, I could talk to about things not work related, who I can go to dinner with in a city, who I can meet for a drink, or just, forward articles to, hey, what do you think of this? Having those relationships and sustaining them just help you grow as an individual, as a professional. And yes, if you do need help with something, hey, do you know this person? Could you make an introduction? 9 times out of 10, they're probably willing to do that for you. And all of that just comes by getting to know people, being genuine, and just using that authentic self to, one, build that rapport, earn trust, and, see where that leads.
For sure. My next question is, you said that at like 12 or 13, you were really like head on full force, like pursuing this job in this industry. And so you've been at it for like a decade at this point, over a decade actually. So what has been like how do you keep yourself kind of fed and with the driving factor to go out there every day and go get it and make it happen for yourself?
Yeah, I think I know what the goal is. I know where the finish line is. And it's what can I do to put myself in a position to get there? And you can't forget about your why. You can't forget about focusing on the present. And I think it's just if you give it your all and you go 110%, which is the only way I know how to do things. I mean, I'm not really one to just give 50% towards it. I'd rather just not do it at all. I find that helps, keep me moving forward, because you can't get stagnant. That was the other thing. When you get comfortable, you become complacent. And so I'm comfortable to trust the people I work with. I'm comfortable in that I know the organization, I know the place, but it's how can I continue to evolve and say, okay, just because we did this last year and 4 predecessors before me, they did this, how can I take it here? And that, I guess, progress and that change in mindset, that's what drives me, because I'm a builder at the end of the day. And I want to be able to help build organizations and leave them in positions to succeed and ultimately drive resources, which is the name of the game right now in college athletics. So wearing those different hats and knowing how this office impacts so many other units and the complete organization as a whole, that's what drives me. Because when you think about it, we're getting to do things that happen once in a generation, and we're reshaping college athletics. So whether that conversation's happening at the top with the Autonomous 4 conferences, or it's happening among the mid and low majors and the Group of 5 conferences, all of that conversation is so impactful, and being able to help drive a small part of it from it just keeps me energized, because it keeps you in the mix a little bit.
Absolutely. I think striving for excellence is something that we can all implement into our lives, and, hitting it with that full 100%, 110% even, just go after it and go get it. I got two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. The first one is, what is your advice to someone trying to get into the sports industry, whether it be, administrative like you, whether it be media or various other aspects? Like, what would your advice be?
Reach out. It's really reach out, ask for shadow opportunities, ask to hop on a 20-minute Zoom with someone. Being able to have those interactions, see kind of what that day in the life is for them. I've shadowed, PA announcers like Gordon Deal with the Giants, Colin, Ethan Wilson at the Mets, so many others, Sage Salmons with Vegas Golden Knights and the UFL. Having those relationships to be able to see what they do, how they do it, and the people you meet from that, it just helps you continue to grow. At the end of the day, nobody has all the answers. All you can do is give yourself as many tools in the toolbox to help be part of the solution. And the biggest advice I could give someone is just reach out. Yes, you may hear no, but that's okay. For every no I've gotten, there's been 5 yeses. And just one person saying, hey, sorry, I can't, or just not responding at all, didn't stop me from continuing to knock at different doors. So obviously know the boundaries, know the limits, do what you're comfortable with. But ultimately, I think if you're respectful, if you've established a genuine interest, people in this industry are more than willing to help, because the chances are somebody's done that for them.
Perfect, man. Thank you for sharing that. And then my last question, I try to ask everyone this. It's who do you want to see on my show next? But the catch is that you kind of have to set the introduction and help me grow my network in a little bit.
Oh, who should be on your show next? That's a good one. I think you'd have a blast with my high school athletic director. Mike Raftery is one of the funniest people on the planet, and his experiences and insights are wild. Dude was in an SNL skit when he was in elementary or middle school, something like that, and played football at a high level at Paramus Catholic, and runs a hell of an operation at Fort Lee. So I'd say Mike Raftery. I think you'd have a blast, and you may have to bleep a couple things out here and there. But,
hey, I don't mind the profanity. It's just YouTube. But sounds great, man. We'll make the introduction and we'll get it done. Jordan, I appreciate you giving some of your time to me and just being willing to sit down and have a conversation with me and share some of your insight and advice along with your stories. It means a lot to me. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Anything helps. If you would like to follow along on my journey, I will see you in the next one.